I'm going to demo what I mean by control, and I'm going to demo really, hopefully not for too long, but succinctly enough what I mean when I say contour and how to draw objects with a contour focus. What you're going to see is predominantly this sort of top-down camera drawing thing where I take a pencil and I draw some stuff. What you won't see on screen is the image we're actually drawing. So if you're watching this in post, or actually if you're watching this with me right now, which 18 people are, so hopefully everyone, understand that for you to kind of follow along with what I'm doing, you're going to need to have that image open on the side. I can hear myself every single second of every day, and it's like a nightmare. Okay, perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at, we're going to do this in a couple different ways. What I expected for us to do at the control drawing was to draw everything. We're going to start with drawing one where we draw everything. We're going to do one where we draw just a group of objects, and we're going to draw one object to kind of more of a completion. That way we can look at the different ways that contour drawing can produce a drawing. But more than anything, it allows us to talk about our first few principles, which are vague to specific. Let me talk about vague to specific right now. If we're to draw all the objects, it is very hard to draw all the objects well if we start with like some detail stuff. Let me get a piece of like scrap paper. If we were to try and draw a face, we tend to do this thing where we're going to be like, okay, let me start with a head. A head's mostly an outline, and then let me give it like an ear, and let me give it like another ear, and then all of a sudden we go, okay, boom, it's go time. Time to get really here and really in tight, and let's give him like a real smoky eye. Let's give him like a real smoky eye. Let's give him that look, and then they'll come in here. And you'll give him like one good eye, maybe some eyelashes, maybe like an eyebrow. And then you'll be like, okay, it's schnoz time. Let's give him a big old schnauzer. Let's give him a cartoon schnoz because I don't want this stupid metaphor to go on too long. This way of drawing is kind of what I call like local scale. What I mean by local scale, it's like an artisanal weights distribution company, is we started with a larger object, like the size of the head, but then we immediately went to small, teeny tiny objects. That's kind of a natural inclination we have that we want to kind of avoid with what we're doing right now. What I mean by that when it comes to still life objects, instead of a bad drawing of a face, is like this. I currently have two pencils. One is a 2H and one is a 4B. It's gold, if we can kind of see that, because all of the other portion is worn off. I usually draw with an H pencil and a B pencil. It's usually a 4B and a 4H. Doesn't really matter what the numbers are, to be perfectly honest with you, because everyone draws differently, and whatever numbers work well for you, work well. I tend to do well with one sort of 4H and one 4B. You might do better with something like a 6B or a 2B. The specific numbers, again, are going to be more or less like up to what you do. Okay, vague to specific. If I were to try and draw all these objects, we'll see a quick version of this in the video where I do sight measuring, which we also got to cover today, which is going to be a whole bunch of stuff. What I mean by is like this. If I were to, there's this really, I love how much this number box is in the way. So let me just really briefly, just for me, because I am drawing in front of some stuff, frame out where the number box is and frame out where this recording sign is, because in our preview we see that. In post we won't see that, but lets me know everything sort of there left, and within this box is dead. Let me draw like a skull. That way I'll know. Dead. Okay, so if I were to draw, again, remember, this is not an 18 by 24. We're working on an 18 by 24. If I try to fit an 18 by 24 on the page, we're not going to kind of see it. It's catastrophically big for this thing. So first off the bat, what I'm going to do is we're going to pretend this is an 18 by 24. If I wanted to get everything on this page, or everything within this image on there, it helps for me to quickly frame out where all the stuff is, and where all I'm going to draw. I talked about this a little bit last time, about if it helps, put some little corner boxes in here that let me know where the edge of our paper should be. So like this is like if this entire thing were an 18 by 24, I'm going to bring it in slightly and draw some itty bitty corners because it helps me, when I'm doing this demo, know that's within shot, and it will help you kind of basically frame out some stuff. Drawing these things, in drawing these little corners like crop marks, it's basically like saying, I'm going to make everything fit in there. Nothing goes higher than here. You can even just literally draw a line straight across. And nothing goes further out than here and further out in here. Doing that may not appear to do a lot, but it will help us kind of mentally to keep everything within there. Why am I starting with those crop marks? Because if we do vague to specific, if we try to understand what I mean by that, vague to specific is, let me turn that off, that's going to be dumb having that thing whirl around. Largest shapes to smallest shapes. We still think of these individual objects as distinct objects. This is like the carafe, or it's not a carafe as it turns out, the coffee thing, the big metal guy in the back. You think of like the big metal guy and the 2-liter and all this stuff. What we tend to not think of is the entire collection of objects as one thing. The largest shape is the page of the document itself. The second largest shape is the collection of the objects. If we look at the collection of the objects, we may notice that from the top of the metal guy, I always forget what he's called. It's like a stovetop coffee maker. The top of the metal guy to the bottom of the table kind of makes a line. This would be really rad if I could show you all right now. But we're going to draw all these objects vague to specific. I do like a kind of thing where I talk about furthest point up, down, left, and right. Sort of like up. Oh, let me kind of do that right. Up, down, left, and right. In the same way that we kind of indicated where the edge of our paper is, we're going to indicate where the edge of these objects are. If we look at the objects and we look at the rows, we notice that nothing goes higher than the rows. And this is really odd to try and describe to you with the image without being able to show you the image. Let me bounce over to a Photoshop real quick for this, because I think that might be most helpful. Because I keep talking about these things and we're not actually looking at it together, and I want for us to look at it together. Photoshop. Okay, whoa, everyone's face. Okay, that had a hard time. So, now that we're looking at the same dang thing, because I kept talking about it out of reference, nothing goes higher than this set of flowers. If we were to draw an imaginary straight line that went across all of them, nothing would go higher than that. If I were to try and draw this dead straight line, it contacts the flowers before it contacts the top of the metal carafe, or the or the central body of the carafe, or the top of the bottle. Nothing goes further up than that rose. Identifying what goes furthest up and furthest left. The furthest left object is the edge of this box. The furthest right object is the edge of this flower. And the furthest down object is the bottom of the shadow. Arguably for objects, it's the edge of the cake. If we draw a straight line from the bottom edge of the cake and carry it dead right, we can see a little teeny tiny baby gap between the bottom of the cake and the bottom of the tomato. But when I say furthest points up, down, left, and right, that's kind of what I mean. What objects go furthest up, furthest down, furthest left, and furthest right? All right. It does. It is within the drawing, and it does go further left and further right. But I consider the objects the focus of this drawing. The table is relevant. The table helps, but the table is kind of like an auxiliary component. It's supplemental more than it is absolutely necessary. We should draw it, but when we think of these objects, what we see most forward are the objects. The table is an incredibly interrupted shape. And it being an interrupted shape, it's just going to get deprioritized because that line is so interrupted. Okay, again, it's been 10 minutes and I haven't actually drawn anything. Let me kind of get to this boy. So if this, it helps to focus on the fundamentals and talk about what I mean for this point up, down, left, and right, but it also helps to draw. Again, what was asking about was like drawing from the wrist versus drawing from the shoulder. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Furthest point, up, down, left, and right. When we look at that rose, we can literally just go, if this is the edge of our paper, these marks are light because I'm using an H. I will use a B soon. That will make these marks much easier to identify. I'm going to start with an H because we can do a whole bunch wrong with our H before we go to our B. We notice that the top of the drawing does not touch the top of the rose. There is a gap between the top of the drawing, or the edge of the paper, which is right around here. Let me just outline that because it makes it easier to see. Boom. Between the edge of the paper and the top of our rose. There's a gap right around there. Now, if I were to do it as a little tick mark, it'd maybe be around there. I was like, why are you using those tick marks? We don't have to use just the tick marks. We can draw just a straight line all the way across there. It's totally fine to draw lines where they don't exist on the objects. If our rose is our tallest object, we can try to identify the kind of pitch of that rose as a line. If we look at the rose, oh, this is killing me. Let's go like this. Let me just draw the object real quick because let's piece this out. Perfect. The total amount of objects, if we look at the drawing, from the top of the carafe, right around maybe here, it's not as high up as the rose. The rose tip is further to the right and it's further up. The carafe is further to the left. It's towards more of the middle of the image. If it helps, we can literally just draw a line down the middle. Let me try and do that a little bit straighter. If we go straight from the carafe to the leftmost, bottommost object, which is the little box guy, we can draw one line from the top of the carafe all the way to that box. And if we notice, there appears the left half of our drawing looks almost like triangular. The right half, maybe not so much. If it goes from top of the graph to the top of the rose, from the rose sort of straight down, and from the bottom of the cake. Now, what I'm going to ask at this point is, everyone can kind of see this weird polygon, right? I'm going to assume we can. Does this look like the objects? Absolutely not. It does not look like the objects. Vague to specific, what I'm identifying right now, or what I'm attempting to identify, is within this total paper shape, where do the objects exist? They don't encompass the entirety of it. They encompass a majority of this. They don't touch the bottom. They approach the bottom. The bottom of the cake's not down here. The rose approaches the top, but it does not touch the top. This helps do what was talking about, where he says, I draw objects too big. If we start vague to specific, instead of drawing each object first, we draw where every object exists. We know if this is where the rose ends, if this is where the box ends, if this is where the cake ends, it won't run off the page. Now, inevitably, what happens when I say this is people in class, they raise their hand, they go, yeah, what's up, Jeff? And they go, how do I know that's where the rose ends? We gotta start with it. We're gonna find some things wrong in this. That's gonna be okay, but we have to start by just putting some marks down. By putting marks down, we can correct them. We cannot correct marks that have not been put on the page. If I know that this is basically where the rose is and this is the top of the carafe, I can start to also draw the objects in one line. In maintaining that vague to specific, I start first by where all the objects exist. As a ballpark, as like an electron field, if you're kind of a sciencey person, you're trying to find out where the electron orbitals exist, I go, it's in here. What I can then do is try to draw all the objects in sort of one line at a time. The cake rests around here. I'm going to start with the rose. Why am I going to start with the rose? Because the rose is the longest total object. From tip of the rose to the bottom of the bottle, that can be translated as one line. That's roughly what this line is, but let me try to clarify it and truncate it where it ends. Let's do one rose, sort of like, oops, not that hard, but like boom. I can do a little line right here because that's where it ends, and top of the rose right around here. Largest shapes to smallest shapes. The rose in one line. In identifying this rose, we're going to use what we call hour of the clock through sight measuring. I'll get to that after I try to draw everything vague first. I'm going to draw where the box is because that vertical line is going to help me identify things. The vertical line is kind of a large shape. And there's a box over here. For me, what I did when in drawing this line is I roughly drew a line down the middle. Yes. Again, you're going to see a lot of lines. I will put a lot of lines down. That's sort of the way I draw, and that's the way that I will sort of encourage you to draw. I could do a million lines with an H, and it won't destroy us. The B's will help us clarify. But I've got sort of a rose in one line. I've got our box. From that box, it kind of runs diagonally. Oops, not that steep. Definitely not that steep. It kind of runs like this. I can carry that line all the way off this page, and it won't matter because where this line ends is irrelevant right now to just drawing it. It is totally okay to draw lines where they don't exist. It takes so much longer to do this as I talk about it. And I will try to not run forever in a day. I'm going to just try and draw these as quickly as I can without too much worry. Also, all I'm trying to do is basically like frame out where everything's at without, like, here's the top of the carafe. Drawing one line straight across. It's maybe a little bit low. And if that's the top of our carafe, further down and to the left is the bottle. I can draw the bottle as one line again, but it's totally, there's the edge of the box. It's totally not right. It's like right here. It's right here. Yeah, boom, boom. Bottle is one line. Again, humor me for a minute while I try to draw this quickly, because we'll spend forever in a day doing this. Sometimes it's easiest for me just to show you than it is for me to just talk about everything. Let's do it like that. And then vague to specific is like a mantra that helps, because I can draw that tomato as just that shape, and that's all that matters right now. I don't have to sit here and try and like draw the little junk on it, or like the leafy guys or some junk. I can just sort of leave it there for now. Whoop, 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 whoop. These curves are going to murder people. It's kind of weird to hear just silence in a drawing class. It's amazing if I don't talk the whole time, we actually get some quiet in here. I know, right? You are totally cool to step out whenever you need to. And my cake is going to run off where I predicted. Let's see if this is the edge of the box. And then this is the edge of the 2-liter. And then this is the edge of the cake. Again, very kind to sort of chime in with questions and things. A major component of what we have in these classes when we teach is we have the kind of direct and indirect feedback from students that helps us know what is going well and what isn't. We are almost entirely at a loss in this new environment about all of those kinds of feedback. That's my way of saying I don't really know what is working particularly well for you without some ability for that to translate in questions or in feedback, or even like there's like, I'm gonna have to cut his name now that I'm saying that, but with students, I just gotta stop doing that whenever we're recording. But with students that have their cameras on, like that indirect feedback of like seeing their face when we demo something, that also helps. It's not like this isn't my way of saying we all need to turn our cameras on or something, but understand that for me to do well with each of you, having some level of feedback, he says, trying to draw and doing too many things at once, having some feedback helps. Oh my god, I can spend forever in a day drawing this crap. I need to just speed it up. Oh, haha, my bottle in the wrong spot. That's fine, we'll move it. what's really rad is I do this entire drawing in about 2 minutes, or a minute and a half on the produced video, and it's much easier to watch and endure when we don't have to sit there and watch it all at once. Oh, those super wavy lines that look like garbage, but that'll work for now. And then Skladow. That's more or less it. Oh, I've not done the carafe. Hello, carafe. I love this. I always call it a carafe. It's totally not a carafe. It's just like some weird director's cut version of drawing where you get to hear all of my dumb thoughts because they're broadcast at full volume. So when we do these classes in person, I will usually start with like a 20-minute demo where I do this kind of thing. There will usually be some portion where I just kind of draw the junk. And usually, if my written directions and my spoken directions and my... basically, if all the other stuff maybe doesn't do the job, usually just seeing it happen will help answer questions implicitly that spoken directions don't answer very well. Oops, let's bring that in. There we go. Whoop. The thing about being, especially if you're a major, the thing about being an art student, or the thing about these kinds of classes is almost everything we learn is understood and translated visually. Dang, I made my metal pot a beef boy. That is so wrong, but whatever. Well, I'll talk about how it can be corrected as an example. I just need to get this thing done. Let's go like this. Oh, it's so much bigger than it should be. Ah, I'm running into the thing. I'm experiencing errors in real time. That means the guys up here. I'm going to draw straight into my... It looks so good. Thank you. What I want... Hopefully by now it's starting to look like the thing. I cannot read. I never learned to read. Thank you, person whose name I won't say out loud because we're recording. Hopefully by now it's starting to look like the stuff. What I'm trying to get at is... let's kind of do like that. That's kind of... In the beginning, it probably did not look like the thing. It's hopefully starting to look like the thing now, as it should. And part of what we're demoing here is where it started to get here. It started with really long lines that didn't really look like anything. Because if those early lines are not correct, it doesn't matter how much detail. Again, I want to load that term into a cannon and shoot it into the sun. It doesn't matter how much detail we add. If the detail is in the wrong place, it's not going to do us any good. We have to make sure and locate and triangulate where everything should be before we... I'm making that up at this point. Before we add the information of before we add anything of what it looks like, we have to make sure and know where it belongs. Again, I'm still using the H. I'm trying to just go quick instead of talking the whole dang time. Some dainty lines in there, and it kind of does like a bushy triangle guy. And then there's this weird mishy. And it's like it goes a little higher up. Whoop. It goes like this. It makes like a big triangle. It goes like this. Whoop, whoop. Okay. Perfect. How long did that take me to draw? Let's see. It's about 10 minutes. It took me about 10 minutes to draw that once I shut up and I finally actually started to draw some things. Let me add a wall. It goes like this. Take that, time. Again, we won't see the time in post, so I'm going to sound like a maniac yelling at something that doesn't exist. Then we'll add something there, and we'll add the right around here and right around here. Okay. Oh, too steep. Yeah, there we go. Okay. when I stop talking, hopefully it makes more sense, and we get to see where it goes from really basic lines to more accurate. Accuracy is what we're going to use. We're not going to use detail. If I'm going to point at something, and I want you, even if it's just to yourself, I totally missed the pair. I want you, even if you're just saying it to yourself, I want you to kind of tell me what that object is. If you're just going to say it to yourself, that's fine also. But I want you to try and identify some stuff, because this is pretty basic. Everything here is described pretty quickly. Let's try and throw that shkadow. Let's try and do that. Yeah, I realized that they were incorrect. I realized I totally flubbed this section, and that's part of what I'm going to use in describing how to fix it at this point. What I'm trying to do right now is show you the basics of how to start the drawing and how to begin to prepare it. I'm going to point at something. Even if you do it to yourself, sort of Blue's Clues style, I want you to try and identify what it is based in the reference photo. As I wiggle the whole camera annoyingly. That's right, student who will be replaced by goat sounds in the produced video. Because yes, I scrub everything and it goes, ah. That's the cake. Now, when we look at the object in the photograph, and then we compare it to this thing, we can notice that there's an enormous, catastrophic, vast canyon of difference between them. This is not what the cake looks like. If I were to point at this component right here, this is what? That is the shadow. Now, it sounds dumb for me to say, but like, is this what the shadow in the cake looks like? No, it's not. It's close enough that when we see this arrangement of lines, again, lines, all that I'm drawing right now are the basic contours. When I draw a shadow, know and recognize that I'm not taking a moment and I'm not going like this to fill it in. I'm identifying the edge of that shadow, because where the edge exists helps inform some things. Drawing it as a shadow and then filling it in is not what we're not doing value right now. But we're trying to quickly make everything into the basic amount of shapes possible. We're focusing on line, on contour, on both the explicit contours like the edge of things and the implicit contours like the shadows found on them, or the shadows that are projected from them. I haven't got to the point where I've started to add surface detail, because I'm starting with first an example of how to draw all the objects together, because when we did the control, we did all the objects. What I'm going to ask for this project is we draw a group of objects. I'll demo that in a second. But it started as just like one long line. And that one long line contained within it a lot of information. It said nothing went higher than this. Notice when I actually drew the flowers and I drew the edge of the lid for the guy, it went off of the edge of this fictional paper. When we drew those corners, like we did for our control, I asked them to draw them like, put those corners like they fill 85% of the drawing. If we pretend the edge of the paper is at that fictionalized perimeter, it gives us a little bit of wiggle room where the actual edge of the paper could be higher, and we don't have the problem where we just draw and then half of our drawing is off the page. That took about 10 minutes. We can see where this stuff is. Now, someone pointed out accurately, my guys are missing. I got two dudes missing in here. I got the silver thing and I got the apple that are not in here. I messed up. It's fine. When you do this quickly, you're going to mess it up. It's not about getting it perfectly right immediately. That's not a thing. We're going to start quickly. We're going to start by drawing, and we're going to start by drawing it. I think we're done. We're going to start by drawing everything quickly, and then we're going to take the time and make it more accurate. If I were to continue on this, we can see I've started to sort of add some detail. I've added some information on the spout, right? We can start to see the spout. If I were to zoom in, ooh, power of zoom, we could see that I've added a little bit of information along the body of this object where it looks more like the spout, and I can come in here and in holding my pencil this way, I can kind of go like zoom, and I can go like zoom, zoom. That's totally too wide, and I can add some of these lines on the surface that describe it. But yes. No, no cross-hatching, no value of any kind. Yes, you are correct. If I were to draw an egg, because I'm basically done with this guy, let me put an egg right around here. Oh, that's a skinny egg. I added an egg, and let's say that there's a shadow cast from that egg on the table. I'm filling in the egg shadow on the table by just sort of rubbing it in. Cross-hatching is like if I were to try and add some shadow along the body of that by and then accumulating them. And in the accumulation it makes, oh, that's super shiny over here. It makes this part of the egg look dark because the accumulation of line. We are not going to use the accumulation of line to add value to these things. This is about as much information as we're going to add for the shadow. At no point are we going to go like this and add some stuff or like crosshatch. We'll get there. Trust me, we're going to get there. But it doesn't matter. We can't start adding the relative tone and value to things until we know where the things exist and are able to translate them well. Okay, so that was a quick version of how I describe how to draw things quickly. A good rule of thumb is if we're going to spend... Ordinarily, we would spend the entire 2 hours and 45 minutes on each drawing in class. And that's sort of my analogous rule of thumb because there's still the expectation that you produce the work at that level. If we were going to spend one whole class period on this, 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it took me 10 minutes to get to this point, that gives me the rest of the 2 hours and 30 minutes to make this more accurate. How can I make this more accurate? Well, first of all, we can notice that my dumb apple and my shiny guy aren't in there. I was only using an H. I've got some B's left. I came in here and I started to articulate this real darkly for the sake of showing you how we don't add this information until we've drawn the overall shape. But what I would want to do before I started adding any information is I would want to correct the shape. I drew this object too big. It's just way too big. It's too big. Part of the reason I know it's too big is because it's squeezing out these guys. It's going a little too high. It's actually probably at the right height. It's just too wide. It needs to be narrowed. We'll get to how to identify what things are sort of out of balance with sight measuring. We should endeavor to draw things vague to specific like I did here, where they start as just like, this bottle started first as one line vertically. Why did it start as one line vertically? Because the object is taller than it is wide. And from that one line, let me do it over here because it's super shiny over there. If I were to draw this 2 liter, I would start first as drawing it in one line. That line where it begins and where it ends gives me all the information that says what is its height. Proportion is height. Proportion of the size and weight relationships that describe a form. If the bottle is this tall, it would be roughly that wide. It wouldn't really be a 2 liter if it were this tall and then that wide. It'd be like a cardboard box. How do I know it's that wide? I'm just sort of... Honestly, most of what we do in the beginning is we kind of not guess and make it up, but we identify that it is wider than, or it's taller than it is wide, and we draw lines. If I drew the lines way out here, we'd be like, oh, that's too wide. Again, all the answers to the objects are found on the object. It's totally fine to draw lines in the wrong place, as long as we come in and correct them. I'm going to use a B and just identify the more correct lines. Let me do this on a new sheet of paper, actually. I'm gonna do the same thing where I'm talking about what I mean by contour. Instead of with all the objects, I'm gonna do it with just a couple of objects, and I'm probably gonna do the cake apple 2 liter pear. When it comes to trying to start with drawing all the objects quickly, do we have any questions? I know that was kind of quick. Perfect. I think there's junk on the back. There is junk on the back. Let me get a new sheet of paper. Paper. Now, when we get to doing this project, one thing that's different between the control and the contour drawing is I want for us to draw a group of objects. I don't believe I stated that as such in the directions. Part of the reason I didn't state it as such in the directions is because I wanted to do this demo first. I will add it immediately after this class. I want us to draw a group of objects. Those group of objects must touch. That's a way of saying if we draw the glass bottle on the left, you have to draw all the objects that it touches. The glass bottle on the left touches the sort of like fake, no, this paper's super wavy. It touches the kind of fake wooden box, and it touches the tomato. That would be a 3-object installation. We would then need to also add the table and the corresponding shadows. If we were to draw the cake, as we're going to do in this example, we would draw the cake and all the objects that touch it. We have to draw at least 4 objects. The table, the walls are not objects. Again, I'll clarify this in the... let me draw where this guy is just for the sake of this demo. I will specify all this again in the written instructions on Blackboard. Again, if we have any questions about what our things are after the class, the easiest place to check for our instructions is on Blackboard. So the same way that we just drew some junk and we tried to draw all of it at once, let me try and do the contour focus, drawing a series of objects as we would do in the project. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that this is the edge of our paper, the actual edge, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do like this, and I'm going to say nothing goes higher than this. Again, if you don't actually have to do these corners, they help me mentally kind of do that. I'm going to draw the cake, pear, 2-liter tomato. If I were to look at the cake, pear, 2-liter tomato, I can draw a straight line along the bottom of this page where this is where the base of they will be. The bottommost object is the cake. Nothing goes lower than the cake. I'm going to say the cake ends around there just to make sure it stays on there. If the tallest object is the 2-liter, let's say the 2-liter ends right around here. And that will make sure kind of everything fits on page. I'm going to try and draw this quickly again, vague to specific. If I were to draw the 2-liter with one line, would it go left, right, or up and down? That's right. Like Dora the Explorer standing in front of the ocean asking where's the ocean. It would go up and down. Why would it go up and down? Because it's taller than it is wide. If I were to draw the 2-liter in one line, it would be like this. Our early drawings are going to have a lot of information in them. A lot. Too much information, probably, to absorb at once. One thing a student was asking about before we did this demo was drawing from the wrist and drawing from the shoulder. You may notice I don't hold my pencil like this a lot. When I hold my pencil like this, almost all of the movement comes from the wrist forward. It comes from the fingers. Like I can write, hello world. And all of that movement comes from in here. If I were to try and draw an arc, it would be restricted by my wrist when I lay it on the table. If I hold my pencil like this, sort of like the easiest way is like I tell students in class, give me a thumbs up, put the pencil in your hand. It should go in the direction of your thumb. And then you usually kind of hold it with your thumb and forefinger. I usually rest it lightly against my palm right here. And then I can draw an arc that goes from, what's in shot? Let me do this with a dark pencil. I'm going to go from point 1 to point 2, because that's in shot. I can draw a pretty smooth arc if I hold it like this, because I'm no longer restricted by the movement of my wrist and fingers. My whole wrist and forearm, if I can fit that long guy in shot, mostly stays perfectly still. We'll talk about this a lot more in the future, but no, part of what the questions were before we drawing was, How do I draw a sort of like straight line all the way across and make it smooth? Drawing from the shoulder. We'll get there. No, that's the thing. Also remember, if you're drawing like this and you leave your hand against the page, you're going to ruin it because it's going to be a big blurry mess. Okay, 2 liter, 1 line. That lets me know where it starts and where it ends. Notice I did not have this end of the 2 liter line. Let's sort of mark that with an H so we know if that's the top and that's the bottom. It don't go anywhere near this line. Why doesn't it go anywhere near this line? Because this is meant to indicate the bottom of our cake. I actually think it should be a little bit higher. There's a distance between where the 2 liter ends and where the end of the cake ends. They are not in line with one another because in front of this 2 liter is a tomato that is just almost barely exactly at that same line. That would be around where the tomato ends if this is where the cake ends. So this is where the 2 liter ends, this is where the cake ends, or 2 liter ends, tomato ends, cake ends. 2 liter starts, if the 2 liter starts here, we look along the body of the 2 liter, around halfway through the body of the 2 liter, let me draw a rough half right around here, is around the edge of the cake. And I can draw one straight line like this, all the way across the page left to right. That is roughly half down the body of the 2 liter, going left, and this is roughly where the top of the cake is. So if this is the top of the cake and this is the bottom of the cake, I know the cake and the 2 liter don't touch. They don't touch. They appear to touch. They don't touch. If this is the height of our 2 liter, I'm going to wing kind of like the width of the 2 liter. Notice the lines of the width of the 2 liter, they don't really bend. They bend because I'm a human and my arms wiggle. But they're more or less straight up and down. This is a kind of organizational line that we're going to do in depth a lot with rectilinear line. But all of what we're starting to introduce now is organizational line. The most important function of organizational line is sight measuring. We'll get to that in a second. It's 9:30, so this class might run to about 10:30, but it's because I kind of want us to know this stuff real well. So if this is the height of the 2 liter, and if I go, well, it's taller than it is wide, I've just drawn some lines left and right about where the 2 liter ends left and right. They could be wrong. They look right. If they were way out here, I'd be like, well, that's not right. It's not that wide, and I'd bring them in. Our cake, the side of the cake, if this is the side of the 2 liter, the side of the cake does not touch. And it comes down at an angle. It goes down and to the right. It kind of does like this guy. Oops, hello. Kind of does like that guy. But they don't touch. And if we look along the body of the 2 liter, let's kind of draw the 2 liter real quick because I love that guy. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to not continue to draw everything vague to specific. Let me do it real quick, actually, before I just completely go against everything I'm telling you. Let me draw the tomato real quick. Yeah, that's probably the tomato. No, maybe a little bit less. Let's do the cake. Cake's right around here. Top of the cake, this little rim. The white rim of the cake is higher than the top of the tomato. That's sort of like a reference point. If this is the top of our tomato, I know the white rim ends above the tomato, and I can kind of put a mark, and I can go like this. Oh, isn't that frustrating to see a line drawn that smooth? Kid who asked the question. Drawn from the shoulder. It'll get there. And then, this is probably a little bit too wide. Let me bring it in. Whoop. And then cake. And then cake. It's actually a little bit, it's a lot steeper than that. Cake. Cake. I'm not going to forget the pear. There's a thing in there. And then there's the pear. Kind of goes like this. Top of the pear. Ooh, wow. I did it again. Yeah, probably. The cake I did first before the pear because the cake is a larger object than the pear. But what I'm noticing is when I continue with this, if my cake is this size and I add the pear on top, because the arc of the pear bottom ends mostly above the top of the pear. The pear is almost like a sphere with like a cone on top. If I were to kind of add that, it makes my 2 liter way too small. Way too small. Makes my 2 liter way too small. Let me draw the rest of the 2 liter, and I will correct the rest of these, because again, we're at that point in the drawing where it could use correction. We're going to hit a point with every drawing where it uses correction, especially when I'm trying to draw something from a screen and then translate it to a flat surface in front of us. Let me bring our 2 liter into kind of more focus. Again, we're only focusing on the contours. I have drawn this 2 liter to death. There are 3 radial bands that are sort of in thirds that run along its body. It's widest here. 3 radial bands. 2. 1, 2. Kind of goes like this. And then it pinches slightly. This radial band's wrong. And there's another radial band down here that is just barely above the tomato. Yeah, my tomato's way wrong. It is totally fine if when we draw it's not perfect in the beginning. Part of what we're doing is we're working to make it more accurate. We would not know if this 2 liter is correct compared to the pear and the cake until we've started to draw one of them more clearly. Once we get all of them sort of vague, then we can start to clarify one and bring the rest into clarity. Again, my 2 liter is going to go way sort of up here. Let's just kind of roll with it. If I got to this point and I were a student, I would probably flip the paper over and start again. Yeah, because trying to talk and do this is a bit of a burden. I only know what is incorrect or what is correct when the lines have gone down. If I were to erase all this again, let me pretend I'm erasing. And let me just flip this page over. What do I need to fix? We don't have anything to work from to make it more clear. We have to have something wrong to know that anything is right. In the same way that I talked briefly about what a contour is when contrast appears as a line. The way that this edge of the pear exists only appears to exist because this pencil puts a dark mark and we see it on the white paper. I only know what's wrong because of what's right, and I only know what's right because of what's wrong. This 2 liter cap, way too wide. The whole dang pear and the whole 2 liter is too wide. Like, when it comes to fixing things, we only have the marks that are wrong to sort of help us figure out what's right. Now, if my 2 liter is too wide and it's too tall, so like if I'm trying to draw a 2 liter and it is both too wide and too tall, it's basically too big. I can reduce it in one of those dimensions. I'm going to grab our B real quick, and I'm going to kind of hammer out a more accurate 2 liter. Because I can push this pencil pretty dang hard and get it to be quite dark. I'm just going to go ahead and make it that much smaller. Again, this is kind of like a mega mix of how to draw objects using contour when you're drawing all the objects and when you're drawing a series of objects. Let's get that tomato in there. Oh, this, whoa, that's the danger of using a B. Every mark is real dark, but it helps for you guys to see what I'm fixing when I use a darker pencil. And then this becomes, there's a radial line that goes like this. We're going to have an entire section of, oops, too steep. We're going to have an entire section of our class where we do, that's way too high, where we do curvilinear line. Oh my God, that line is killing me right now. And when we do curvilinear line, we're going to draw a lot of 2 liters. 2 liters are really rad because they follow a kind of logic with how they are constructed. Again, I would not go to a 4B this quick if I were not trying to quickly demonstrate how I can correct. Wow, that cap is way too tall. how to correct these quickly. Even with all the lines that we see in here, we can kind of see the smaller 2-liter within the larger one, correct? Let me kind of hold my pencil in the forbidden way. Again, I'm holding my pencil like this because at this point, the object is so small that it makes sense for me to draw it from my wrist because the entire size of it can be drawn within the range of my fingers. It wouldn't make as much sense to do that otherwise. Let me kind of do... there's a really subtle oval right here. And there's another one right over here. And then there's the shadows that fall along it, because yes, we are trying to draw the shadows. There's kind of a shadow right here. It goes like that. And then there's the shadow that falls right around here. Before we get done today, I will show us examples of oh, I forgot a third band? Really? I'm missing a third band. How about that? I only know I'm missing a third band because I'm looking at it. Yeah, that would let me know. I'm like, well, I need one here. And I need one here. Again, I would try to draw with an H first. That way all of my incorrect lines wouldn't be so glaringly obvious. But it also helps that for the sake of doing this demo, that we see the lines more clearly. I can add the shadow to the tomato at this point. I can add the sort of, I was about to say lettucey top, but it's not actually lettuce. It's just some green. I can add some green on here. And there's a lot of information that describes the body of this tomato. I'm going to try and translate that quickly without getting too much into it because I want to get the cake in there. The highlights are just themselves shapes. Those shapes are contours that describe their edges, as well as the shape of the orange as to where it meets kind of the red. The edge of the color is also a shape. We see that along the body of this tomato, there are elements that are really light and elements that are really dark. But we're not going to come in here and translate it as like, ooh, let me shade this in. Okay, now that I've fixed my 2-liter to be smaller, then that means my cake is way too big. If I look, there's the radial band. I'm going to number these for the sake of this demo. I'm going to number them 1 and 2. And if I were to look, where does the top of the cake end in relation to these radial bands? I've got it kind of right because it ends between those two radial bands. If I were to draw one straight line with the H straight across from here, oops, it ends about where I put the cake. So my cake top is more or less accurate, but my cake is still, it's actually a little bit more accurate, but it's not quite so. I'm going to do like they were saying earlier. Let me add in the same way that I know the pair exists between the bottom of radial band 2 and the top of this radial band right here in sort of like a straight across guy. That whole pair exists within there. So it wasn't too tall, but it was much too tall the first time. Let me try and draw that pair impossibly with sort of the minimum amount of lines using a too dark a pencil for the sake of time. Again, I try to demo all these ways as quick as I can so that we have some time to draw. If after these demos we want to see something more in depth, we can do that. And I can try and redo it if I need to. And there's kind of a shadow. It goes like this, and it kind of curls up. And then there's a darker section over here. Just because I'm doing this in like 30 minutes, does that mean we could probably do this in 30 minutes and we should for the grade? Probably not. It's still a little bit too tall. That's fine. We're going to leave it for now. Again, the expectation is that the amount of time we spend on these is about 3 hours a drawing. We have a week to produce every drawing, so that should be plenty of time if we sort of pace it out. Let me try and get this just done quickly and not so accurately so we can just freaking talk about it, because it's just dumb when it takes this long. If I were to draw the rest of the cake does not touch the 2 liter. It's actually a really jagged edge. I could draw it kind of quickly. It kind of goes down like that, and it goes up and comes down. This was made out of the jumbo-sized Bill Miller's container. Yeah, amazingly, it was made out of a jumbo-sized Bill Miller's container and some insulation foam. They're great. They're made by Jason Wilmy, who's another one of our instructors here. Let me try and get that white in there. It kind of touches right here, and it comes up. No, I think it's one of the like 1 gallon potato salads. And then it kind of touches like that, and it comes straight up here. Again, I'm doing this much faster than I would recommend, just because I want to kind of get to what I'm talking about. There's a darker shadow right here. There's an overall shadow that kind of goes like boop, 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 boop. There's lots of contour on this guy. There's more contour than I can ever demo on here, but all I'm drawing are the shapes. Okay. I went from a way too wrong 2 liter to a little bit more accurate 2 liter to my 2 liter tomato pear cake. There are still places that I could make this more accurate. That was maybe 15 minutes to kind of do it once quickly and then do it twice more accurately. I cannot get it to go much darker than this. I'm trying to compress a whole range of things in a very short amount of time. So no, when you go from drawing it lightly to drawing it more with more darkness, please go more slowly than that. I am looking for us to draw 4+ objects. I did the cake, pear, 2 liter, tomato. Is my cake, pear, 2 liter, and tomato at a level that I would expect it to be given the amount of time? No. This would not satisfy our completion grade. I did this in 20 minutes. I realize it would take you a bit longer, but still, I want to see evident within the work the amount of time that we have afforded to it. What I also want is, like, this pear is still too tall. It ends like right around here. Still too big. Whatever. The top of the box goes like down. We should add some context. This is the edge of the table. This is the edge of the purple box, and on top of this purple box sits the silver guy. We don't have to add the silver guy. It just helps to add a little bit of context in there. And there's our apple that I totally missed last time, and our box is still wrong. Okay, so again, to demonstrate vague to specific, start with the biggest shapes, go to the smallest shapes. As you go from large to small, add the elements within them. Don't start adding the highlights that go on the tomato. I was about to say pear, on the tomato, until you've done the entire body of the tomato and you've tried to make it more accurate. When it comes to drawing a collection of objects vague to specific, does anybody have any questions? Okay, so again, I'm going to have to cut most of that out, so I will reiterate this question. I did hear you, but for the sake of the post-production, the question is, what do we do if we completely ruin our first attempt? What I would recommend is start spending a lot of time with the 2H. You can add a tremendous amount of lines in a 2H pencil and still kind of see what's going on with a whole bunch of lines. I'm going to try and like neurotically, haphazardly draw a bunch of 2 liters in here that are just like drawn too quickly. And if I draw them with the 2H, we can kind of still see what's going on. Like there's sort of more of a 2 liter. Let me draw a little guy in there. Let me get like a little 2 liter in there. We can still kind of see through all of the H's kind of what's happening. You can draw for a long, long time with a 2H or a 4H and not ever effectively ruin a drawing. There's a way of drawing that this is called gesture. This is a gesture drawing. I'm not looking at a 2-liter. I'm just looking down at the paper, and I'm just sort of winging it. And if I were to wing it long enough, chances are some of those lines will appear more or less accurate. We can see what kind of looks like a madman's wire mesh 2-liter and sort of a larger 2-liter. Even with all of this, I could still come in here and then be like... And we can see the 4B lines much more effectively. So what I would recommend is if you're having problems drawing everything well in the beginning, spend a lot more time with your H pencil before you go to the B pencil. The H to B is where a lot of the information is going to be clarified. You spend a lot of time on the 2H. Now, if we completely tank it, can we start over? Yeah, definitely. We could definitely start over. The easiest place to start over, back of the paper. It helps us preserve that paper. I don't ever see the back because I never see the actual paper. Case scenario, let's say we do one and we completely nuke both sides. Please, oh, I made that too pointy. Go to our sketchbook. And if we go to our sketchbook, we have a whole lot of pages that don't matter for a grade that we can do a whole bunch of attempts on. There are lots of surfaces. Again, I asked you to get a sketchbook not because I'm going to look at it for this, like for a grade, but because I want you to have a surface to work on for that purpose. If we have a hard time doing it well, opportunity to draw it somewhere else where it's not for a grade. You can totally do it a third time and probably be all right because we have 30 sheets. We're going to produce 10 drawings. There are 10 projects. Our last projects may require more drawings, so we technically only have 2 attempts for each one. But again, like if we just nuke this stuff 1,000 times, it's not like we're dead. We can get more paper if we need to. I just don't want you to buy more paper. Yes, I would recommend, if you have a hard time, spend a lot of time with the 2s before you go to the B's. Or a lot of time with the H before you go to the B's. We can hopefully see pretty clearly, even though I'm doing it vertically on a rectangular format, a little 2-liter instead of a large guy. Cool. Now that I've completely drawn all over the side and I have to flip it again. Do we have any other questions about what I mean for a contour drawing of an object? I'm going to talk about sight measuring at this point. If not, again, don't give me value. Please don't shade some stuff in. We will have plenty of time to shade some stuff in. Wow, you can still see through that. Whatever, that'll work. Let me get another sheet of paper, actually, because that is quite atrocious. We will have an opportunity to draw stuff with value. Now is not the time to draw stuff with value. Oh, hello, dumb face. Oh, he's hideous. Let me get another sheet. Okay. So, our supplemental video that we have for this week is about sight measuring. Again, it's pretty dang hard for me to explain sight measuring with what we're doing now, but I can bounce off of this top-down camera that I used to draw with and demonstrate that to you using myself as the subject. Let me take a second and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Up, down, left, and right, vague to specific, what is a contour, sight measuring, draw line, draw line. I talked about this a little bit before with like the drawing stuff like this and the drawing stuff from the elbow. If we were doing that thing where if we were trying to draw the edge of the cake where the top is and there's that little nub and it comes down on the sides and it kind of goes like this. If we're going to draw a line, please draw a line. If I'm trying to go from point 1 right around here to point 2 right around here, I know I said this for the control, but I just want to reiterate this. Don't do like this guy. Don't do the chicken scratchy. It's totally fine if we draw this line once and twice and 3 times and 4 times and 5 and 6. That's fine. What I don't want us to do is do this for every single line. It's like, yeah, that's the line. That's the line. It's not the line. This is sketching. Don't sketch. Big ol' X. Bam, bam, bam. Don't sketch. When you're trying to draw a line from point to point, like if I were to try and draw from point 1 to point 2, one movement, A to B. An easy exercise that we do in class that I can't really make us do, but I would love, if we had a hard time doing this, we could try, is literally try to draw 3 points on the page and try to draw a line through them as quickly and as smoothly as possible. If we do it from the wrist, even if they're a little bit closer together, it's not the easiest thing when we keep our edge on the page, our hand on the page. If we keep our hand on the page, it's more or less kind of possible, but the easiest way is to draw from your shoulder using your whole arm to move at a time, not doing this guy. I'll hammer this home later on because I know, right? It's important to do this to draw well. But an easy exercise, if you're having a hard time, is do like point 1, point 2, and then point 3. And if you want to be extra spicy, try to bring it all the way back to 1. You can go like 1, 2, 3, and then go 1, 2, 3, and back. Literally, I do this with students when we're in class. I walk up to their paper and I go like, you got to stop sketching. Here's a point. There's a point. And there's another point. Draw one line between all three. If you have a hard time drawing lines quickly, that's the easiest thing to do. You can just get that back of receipt paper at like a Chick-fil-A and draw that all day long. Okay. No erasing. I think I talked about that at this point. Again, we don't know that a line is incorrect until we've done it incorrectly. Our incorrect lines will help inform us. It also helps me know how much as a total volume of effort you actually put into the drawing. It's hard for me to know if you've done a lot of work if I can't actually see all the work that you